We are here with Nick Ayton, which is kind of difficult to express in one short sentence what he's doing. So he's both a thought leader. I would like probably to start with that. He's a blockchain business architect, as well as speaker, writer, and a fintech influencer. He has quite a substantial profile, both working in a lot of different industries, and he's one of the leading authors in the areas of blockchain, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. We're going to be here talking in this interview about three areas: about his profile, about how he sees all the transformations that are operating in the business, and of course in all the digital transformations / Bitcoin and blockchain and crypto world. And as well, of course, working in his kind of everything that he's been doing so far in terms of work, which is quite significant, so probably we have to synthesize, but we'll get this. So, Nick, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis, for inviting me, yeah.
A pleasure. So, first question. So, can you tell us about you, especially in terms of your education, your background?
Well, I'm from working class roots, working class family. I was born in the East End of London in Whitechapel. And I wasn't a studious student in those days. I was far more interested in sport. And at the end of the 70s, I was wrestling between playing professional tennis and or taking a computer science background. I managed to do both. I did computer science, one of the first, I guess, in my generation to do computer science, as the technology was coming out of mainframe. Pre the PC revolution. But then I did have a go for a few years at playing professional tennis and realised that I probably wasn't good enough to make a living out of it. So my path changed. In 1980-81, when the PC came out, I understood that it was had a profound implication, or could have a profound implication on things. So prior to the official launch of the PCs here in the UK, I set up a PC retailing business, and I was importing them from the States. The IBM PC in those days, 64K, 1320K floppy disk drive, 64K memory, monochrome monitor, and we were pulling them in. And I was going down Victoria Street in London, and I was selling them as mainframe terminals to all the big oil companies. So that was my first experience of the PC revolution. And in those days, actually, I met Rod Canyon, who was the founder of Compaq, when they had global revenues of less than $10 million. And it was a very heady day, heady period of time where, there was all these fantastic founders around that were reinventing the PC revolution, a bit like the blockchain revolution. And many of them were sort of evangelists, they were cool entrepreneurs, they were breaking the rules, they were pushing back against the mainframe domination and trying to make a difference. So yeah, background in computer science, sales and marketing, and I've had 8 startups, so I've been around for 4 decades.
That's quite impressive. Yeah, and it's very interesting because you have the performance of a sports person and the computer science one, and it's actually complete inception. So it's actually fantastic.
Well, it makes you competitive, doesn't it, Dennis?
Yeah.
It's I don't like to lose, but yeah, you slow down with age as well. So
I show a lot of energy for that. So in terms of it's quite interesting picking on the computer background, the computer science background. So one of the things that education is critical, and although not necessarily the academic part of education, but education in general.
Yeah.
How do you saw the bridge between what you learned in the university, which probably was very theoretical at the time, and then the work that you start doing on practice immediately with the inception of the computer industry? Ultimately, that's what you're part of.
When I left college, when I did A levels, I didn't go straight to university. I did my MBA when I was 29 years old, having already had 4 startups. And I actually found it quite easy, actually, because the MBA gives you the formal language of the bankers and the VC community. But I'd already learned all the lessons. I had also been bankrupt as well. I'd lost the business. So, there's nothing like being thrown at the deep end and actually having a go. And when you're young, when I was 23, 24, I had I had one of my businesses was growing very, very rapidly, and I couldn't read a balance sheet or a profit and loss account. I just had no clue, but I did know how to make money. I knew how to bring the revenue in through the front door. And in a very short period of time, one of the businesses was pulling in 4 million a month from nowhere, because we were on the back of a PC curve, a PC revolution curve. So, and then I went from a series of different businesses, and then in 85, 86, I met my wife. I've been married for 30 years. And she was a cabin attendant, and she gave me an idea to design a whole variety of things for commercial airlines. So I built 3 things for commercial airlines. One was an in-flight cabin management system, which recorded all the cabin defects and if there's a seat broken, a light broken, toilet blocked, or what have you. I then designed a complete in-flight point-of-sale system for commercial airlines to do duty-free sales and things like that, including all the customs declaration on the ground. You put your stuff into the air, you sell your stuff, currency conversion, stuff like that. And then the third area, which is really, really quite interesting, which is I worked with Boeing for a while, where we managed to get the 757 Boeing service manual onto 5 CD-ROMs in the cockpit. So we were doing parts implosion, explosion, and trying to think of, how do we minimise the downtime of the aircraft on the ground? So if in those days you had a pilot, co-pilot and an engineer quite often, and the engineer's job was to monitor the aircraft, and if there was a problem, radio ahead, and then get a crew there ready to fix it so you can get it back in the air. So those were really heady days, and I worked with Eastern, Continental, Pan Am, American West Air, some fairly in those days. It was quite big stuff, and then shortly after that, I did a joint venture with Philips, who owned the worldwide colour LCD patent, which I didn't know. I assumed it was a Japanese company, but it was actually Philips at the time. So we built an entertainment system with the armrest stuff, the screen on the armrest, put it in first class, and we installed it. You basically put a fibre optic network around an aircraft, and you installed it on the armrest, and then you trial it for public public response and stuff for a few years. And then 88, Saddam Hussein went into Kuwait, and the airline market stopped. So did we. So technology has its huge bonuses, but it's really vulnerable technology actually to geopolitical and left wing or left field activities that you don't learn in a business school.
Yeah. And that's live. So a very important thing actually, because I want this interview to be between the personal, professional, and the trend part, is one of the things for me as an entrepreneur and as well a business teacher and as well professional is exactly learning with the failure. And sometimes it's failure that comes from you, sometimes it's failure that comes, like you said, from geopolitics and things like that. What was the biggest lesson that you get on that, and how do you cope with that? Because I think that's what made you much stronger and probably the successful person that you are at the moment. Yeah,
well, I mean, life is all about going from one failure to the next, really, in a sense, isn't it? You get pounded and beaten up quite frequently, and you have to just keep getting up. I think the motivation for me is that in the late 80s, when I was at my most sort of active, if you like, I also had a young family. So you look at them and you think, well, just got to pick myself up and just get on with it, But I'm also one of these guys that I have an idea a minute, which is a problem in a sense, because I'm always seeing the next opportunity while I'm still working on something. My wife says I have a low boredom threshold, which is probably true. But the learnings is that I guess really that to expect the unexpected all of the time. If life is going well in a business and business is doing well, it makes me nervous because businesses should be struggling in a sense. It is hard to get that top line moving when you're a new business. And if all of a sudden the money's coming through the door quickly, you think, wait a minute, it's a bit unnerving. And then, of course, managing the operations of the business through various growth phases is enormously challenging. And, I'm a great fan of just chucking people in at the deep end. I'm not one of these people that micromanages people because I don't like being micromanaged. And in a sense, what I do is I have a way of working where I'm very flexible, so I can pivot at any time and I'll take any input that says, you know, there's this coming down the road, or there's this opportunity, or there's this potential issue. I'm not one of these people who's just fixed in one direction and go hell for leather, because you get entrepreneurs that just won't change. You know, they go in one direction and that's it. So I'm enormously flexible because I expect there to be issues and challenges, and it makes me nervous when there's not actually issues and challenges. So I've just learned to be really flexible, really. You know.
So in terms of what you've been doing so far, and you have quite an impressive CV, what would be the highlights, at least from the beginning of your career until now? I'm going to ask about what you're doing presently, but before that, in terms of...
Well, the airline thing was enormously satisfying because you know, we were the small guy competing in those days against Hughes Aerospace, Matsushita in Japan, and the airline industry is enormously exciting. I mean, it's a low margin business, so you know they're very open to fluctuations in economic conditions, whether it's the price of fuel or labour rates or what have you. It's a low margin business, and they've always been very good at looking for new ways to innovate, although quite slow to change quite often. So the airline industry was enormously exciting, and I was quite proud of what I achieved in the airline industry, pushing new technology in the cabin, pushing new ways of doing things, and it was a little bit, I guess, a little bit disappointing when the airline market suffered as a result of the Kuwait crisis, and in a sense it took 10-15 years to recover. So that was probably a good period. I like breaking rules, so I don't like being told, you know, do this, do that quite often. And if there are rules, then the most recent example is in 2012, 2013, I got involved in the pensions business. It's an enormously boring subject, actually, pensions. But actually, it was in the UK when auto-enrolment came out, which was the government's attempt at reforming the pensions industry in the UK. And what it did, Dennis, is that it made that every small business owner, or every business owner, had to offer their employees a pension, and it was a workplace pension. So I got involved in that, and once again, I didn't see it as a pensions challenge. I saw it as an issue with payroll, because you do your pensions calculations, which you apply a tax wrapper, and it happens in payroll. And I pulled my two eldest sons into the business to help me, and we designed a straight-through processing self-service pension platform where you take the payroll information, it automatically creates a trust deed, and then sets up all the different pension accounts where the money as units get invested and where your investment goes, with very little human intervention. And we did that in 2013 and 2014, merged the business with another pension company eventually. The members went to another pension company, and but that was the way. It was changing the rules, really, to say, not see it as a pension challenge, but actually to see it as a payroll challenge. And that was a more recent example where we just broke all the rules, and the pension regulator wanted wet signatures on agreements, and we pushed and pushed and pushed and said, no, we want digital signatures. And it was a real battle quite often to get the regulatory side of things to see that actually we could make things more secure by using technology, not less. And they were stuck in the old world of, well, unless you've got a signature on it, you know, it's not a proper agreement. So that was a more recent example. That business is, we were the first ones really to do self-service pensions, and you know, with a little bit of you know, fun choice thrown in, which people now called you know, robo-advisor. We'd already done that, and although very simple. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that one as well.
Well, that's quite impressive, because you were both in the inception of, let's put it that way, inception of computer industry and fintech as well. So passing through that to the transformation you've been seeing in technology,
yeah,
and especially from computer industry to digitalization of society, yeah, and everything, and as well then digitalization of finance, and now with blockchain, probably everything. What you would say from a technology expert, which you are as well, because you have a lot of roles as CTO as well, what you would see that in the last decades, the biggest changes and the present challenge that various industries have? In your case, you can talk for various.
Well, look, it's this is what I sort of do a lot of talking about this. I run courses, and like you, Dennis, I sort of sort of do the odd lecturing. And here's the way I think of things. If you go back the new industry emerged from the Industrial Revolution, from the Victorian era, we went into an interesting phase where, society was coming out of an artisan economy into a larger scale mass manufacturing economy. And you had the emergence of the likes of, Henry Ford, with the first guy to master the rolling production line and so on. So what happened in those days is that industry just went to a scale that, current methods of measuring efficiency and productivity at the time couldn't keep up with. So what happened is that, new ways of measuring manufacturing at a scale came into play. For example, ledger cards, which then became standard cost accounting. And what happened as standard cost accounting as a way of measuring, the use and efficiency of resources and time and the allocation of cost. What happened is in the 60s, as technology came out of academia, mainframes hardwired that way of doing things, which is for me is expensive, vulnerable, and fundamentally inefficient. And I've always wrestled with standard cost accounting anyway. For example, work in progress has always been considered as an asset, and I've always considered it. I had some really interesting debates with my lecturers when I was doing my MBA. But work in progress for me is actually it's a liability until you turn it into cash. So I've got some fundamental issues with the way it's all done. So as industry was expanding, modern computing then reflected the transaction, how a transaction went through an organisation. And then it created, as we went into the 70s, 80s, this system of record that we have, which is every layer in an industry has its own database. And within an industry, you don't have a standard reference data of passing information back and forth. And then you get this enormous lack of trust that starts coming about because nobody trusts their own data, let alone from somebody else. And then you end up with this theatre, which I think is KYC, anti-money laundering. It's really theatre to protect organisations just in case they make a mistake and just in case they get a lawsuit. They have to show they've gone through some sort of compliance and validation. But because the system of record is fundamentally inefficient, what's happening is that compliance is adding friction time cost to businesses, which is adding at least 20 or 30% in some cases to the operating overheads. So commerce supporting a legacy technology system of record for me is the problem. And that's why blockchain is a very significant breakout strategy, because it's a different starting point in commerce. So I see the world that we live in today as old commerce, and I see blockchain as new commerce. And the thing also is that it's all at once. So there's never before. So we've had the mainframe revolution, and we've had the PC revolution, and then we had the internet in '93, and so on. But this time we have the blockchain, but we have an all-at-once arrival of artificial intelligence and deep learning and Internet of Things and all these other amazing technologies that are all coming at once. So the impact is going to be more profound. And if you are an entrepreneur and you understand these technologies, then there's nothing to hold you back from completely redefining industries, completely redefining markets, and not adhering to the current rules of the game. And as you know very well, Dennis, that what blockchain does, more than anything else, it removes the centre of things. So you don't have the vulnerability, the expense, and the inefficiencies. It is more efficient, it is cheaper to build operating models and do transactions, and it's much more secure. So we'll get into some of that, no doubt, as we talk.
So you're seeing all these areas of technology, and this could go for a day of talks, but it's interesting the point. So you see the confluence of all the different technology development in blockchain.
Look, I mean, the blockchain is in Act 1. So it is fundamentally a network protocol. People big it up to be lots of other things, and of course it is quite profound. But when Dr. Gordon Davis defined the packet switch protocol in 1955, he found a new way of encoding information and send it down a wire across a network much faster, more efficiently. Now, you know, lots of things have been written about blockchain, but blockchain is fundamentally a network protocol that sits on top of the internet. But it gives you a different starting point. So it is a peer-to-peer network rather than a mesh network, as you know. So it's a fundamental different starting point for computer infrastructure, for business infrastructure, and allows you to do entirely different things. But I look at it at that level. You know, it is, you know, when you get into the detail of blockchain, you know, there's tokens, there's different consensus algorithms, you can use it as an information store, as a ledger, and there's all the other characteristics around, you know, immutability and security and, you know, the encryption and using of public and private keys to secure access to things. But to me, it's much more than that, because, you know, the libertarian side of me, and I always thought of myself as a rampant capitalist, and I guess maybe one side of me is, and I'm not telling you which side, but the thing is that as I get older, actually, and I get more frustrated with the politics of the world, I am becoming more of a libertarian. And it's very important as well that I also think that what I always call it, the white elite, the 1%, the people that try and control everything, they're being challenged. And governments are nervous, because when people start coming together, they get very nervous. Regulators and governments are now thinking that their role may be redefined with this technology. And of course, you've got 3 billion people now with an internet connection that can now join society at a different level. They can now start consuming financial services products and getting access to bank accounts and things like that. So the world is massively changing, and the West is losing the battle, in my view. The East has already won in many areas. You know, the world's biggest banks, the world's biggest e-commerce markets. You know, India could actually be the first cashless society. I mean, the way they're going, it's enormously impressive. And the reason for that is they're dealing with fundamentally different issues, and they've leapt a number of technology steps, as you know, and the outcome is pretty tremendous. So the West, for me, I think, is trying to impose its rules and regulations and trying to control everything. Whereas in the East, they're embracing this new technology, and they're saying, okay, it is different, it is what it is. So let's embrace it and build around it. Let's construct things around it. So you're getting, you know, next generation banking. You're getting next generation financial services. You're getting entrepreneurs that want to make a difference in a libertarian sense to bring things to people where they have even small bits of value to trade. And the financial systems is very elitist. It's very discriminatory. You know, if you want to buy an insurance product or a banking product, you have to have a certain level of income. But, you know, if you're living in Africa or you're living in India, you know, you still should have the opportunity to trade your small bits of value. And that's the liberating part of this technology, which is enormously exciting. Now, what is the impact of bringing another 3 billion into the tent, the capital markets tent? Enormous liquidity, super liquidity. But also, it means that the big banks, the establishment, the banks and insurers, don't want to serve that community anyway. And they can't afford to. They can't come down and everyone knows there's no money in retail banking. You know, that's why they focus on commercial and investment banking. But they still have to provide some sort of service to the consumer. And this is where the breakout strategy for blockchain is really massive, because it's a different starting point and it allows you to do different things to reach the people that only have the small amounts of value. And as you know, Dennis, that when you're dealing with the unbanked or the unserved, it's a different kettle of fish. Very often they don't have papers, they don't have ID, they don't have passports. Some of them may not be able to read or write very well. Nevertheless, they should have a right to have access to these services. So it's a long-winded answer to a very simple question, but I think it's very much a libertarian. I'm becoming more of a, as I get older and grumpy, I'm becoming more of a libertarian, I think.
Yeah, I understand that a couple of... So two things that are interesting in what you said. So at the moment, so one thing is about the technology, the other thing is about the concept of financial inclusion. Let's start with technology to wrap up on that. So on the technology, one of the biggest right now challenges is if blockchain can actually create a sustainable growth in terms of centralization versus decentralization, because there's a tendency to centralize it. And as you know, the world geopolitics are not necessarily easier. But how do you see that part of a tentative of centralization in the technology that is by nature and by default decentralized and P2P? So that's the first question. Let's start with that.
Well, look, blockchain is in some respects a social experiment. So Bitcoin is the ultimate social experiment, if you think about it. And I've invested in Bitcoin for some time, and it's done very well. But I don't expect it to survive very long. I think it will be taken over by other things that represent value, and so I think blockchain is in a sense a massive social experiment to start with, and I don't think this current incarnation of blockchain is the one. You're absolutely right. I mean, the concerns, I mean, look at the battles with Bitcoin at the moment around Bitcoin Unlimited and segregated witness, and it does have a fundamental scaling issue. But there is, technically a concentration of mining power in certain regions of the world. And, Bitcoin is going through, it's a pubescent teenager, isn't it? It's going through, it's got its spots, it's got its acne, and it's got its challenges. It's trying to learn how to mature. And I think Bitcoin is the prime example of a technology that is, it is very vulnerable, I think, at the moment. There is a great deal of hype behind it, but then it was only designed as a financial rail. It was designed, so what we're trying to get it to do, Bitcoin and the various iterations of Bitcoin, is we're trying to scale it and get it to do things it wasn't designed to do. It was just designed as a way of exchanging value peer-to-peer, to tokenize cash in this instance, to allow people to do very cheap transactions, fast transactions without a central bank. So what's happened as everyone's forked the code and then started to sort of branch off to try and solve industry problems, then yes, you're right. You're getting communities that are building permissioned blockchains. Distributed ledger blockchains for me is a bit of a distortion there going on there, and we can touch on that. But then you've got the public blockchains, Ethereum. I'm a big fan of Ethereum because I think it's inherently more flexible. But then you've got Bitcoin, which it may not survive in its current form, and there's some very key decisions. I mean, the block time now is 20 minutes. There's a huge backlog of, it's slowing up because the popularity is 20 million plus wallets. It's becoming much more popular. And I think it's starting to creak at the edges. Now, you've got, other things you can overlay on it. So like the Lightning thing is very interesting, but it's really just payments. It's a payment rail. It's peer-to-peer payments. So what people, when they talk about Bitcoin, and as you know, the language in blockchain is very confusing. It means different things to different people. But ultimately, I think in the current incarnation of blockchain and Bitcoin and all the derivations of it, this is Act 1, version 1. It's going to get better. And the underlying technology is still quite old. Encryption's old. Most of the encryption, most of the consensus algorithms are quite old. They've been around for some time. So, and they've obviously pulled them together, and they've solved some of the fundamental computer science challenges around double spend and other things. And there's always a compromise between centralization and distributed ledgers. So distributed ledger, the compromise is often performance, security, and all the other aspects of managing information that's across a disparate estate of nodes on a network. So I think it's not even halfway up the curve. I think it's still at the bottom of the curve. It is early adopter stuff. And people are trying to get it to do things that it can't do at the moment. And it will take time for the technology to catch up, is my view.
No, I completely share your view. So two parts on this, and try, because I want to speak as well about your work, because you're doing a lot of things on this field. So before we go straight away to your work and achievements, or present work, one question. So on this part of the blockchain, especially the relationship with blockchain and AI, as AI and as well supercomputers start coming, or quantum computers, or whatever we call it. So how do you see that? Because we have right now another level of challenge that we didn't have before. Because now we have not just the blockchain developments. That's what you just mentioned. But we have as well artificial intelligence. As we reach a bit of mini singularity, or at least pre-singularity, we're going to have other slightly challenge that, because now is not just managing the emotional disbalance of mankind, but as well the evolutionary part of mankind, that is the machines. How do you see that part? Because I think that part is going to be another element that most of the world economy is not prepared, especially our world leaders.
That's a very good question, and there's a lot in there, and we could probably talk for days on that. So there's a couple of experiences I've had recently with blockchain, and rather than going straight to AI, let's look at the evolution to AI. So let's look at robotic process automation and chatbots. They're a good box pair. They work very well together. And there's lots of very interesting things, especially in things like insurance and the self-service angle of financial services, where you can use chatbots to provide a user experience and interface to the consumers. And then you've got robotic process automation that works at the process level, and then you've got obviously blockchain and smart contracts that works at the business logic level. So you can do some really very cool things. So that's the way that I see that the technology is working at the moment. AI and blockchain, I think there's a big gap in the middle still to be closed. AI by itself, the DeepMind stuff that they've been doing in the healthcare in particular is just mind-blowing. And I think AI is maturing rather rapidly. And if you then flip that back into the world of Internet of Things, for me, the blockchain world is maturing much quicker in that space, in the devices space, where you've got quadrillions of transactions being written from devices of sensors back to some sort of blockchain. So if you look at Intel's Salt Lake, and they had to create a consensus called POET, elapsed time. And they're dealing with entirely different challenges around encrypting information and encoding information on and off the cloud. And the scale of information is just enormous. So if you look at the Radix platform that GE have been working on, the scale of transactions coming off devices, whether it's a power plant, whether it's an aircraft engine, is just enormous. And I think that's where the AI piece is going to sit. It's not going to be conventional banking systems. Banking is constipated to such a degree with the fear of ESMA and MiFID and Dodd-Frank and all of these things. And half of what they're doing, including some of the consortiums like R3, is pure theatre. I don't see them. I think the banks will take their toys back and they'll go and do their own thing, which is starting to happen. So I think the financial services is a complete red herring for me for blockchain. I think the action is around physical devices. So it's the embedding of the business logic of the smart logic into firmware and devices that are now going to start pushing information back to the blockchain. But in between that, there's going to be various iterations of AI engines and big data engines. They're going to look at this information in an entirely different way. Here's an example that, so when we go back to 9/11, that the day the world changed in a sense, the aircraft that hit the buildings, there was an enormous fallout of argument with the reinsurers that owned chunks of those aircraft. And as with large assets, whether it's a big boat or an aircraft, reinsurers each take a chunk of that asset. But what they all failed to recognise is the buildings were insured as well. And then you got embroiled in this enormous sort of 8-year legal battle where everyone was arguing about who was liable and did the aircraft cause the building to collapse, was the building not, and. But interestingly, what would happen is if you'd put and stuck all those reinsurance contracts on an Ethereum network, Ethereum is fantastic at monitoring state. And if you look at any multi-node distributed network, its primary purpose is to measure state and detect changes in state. So that problem would have been solved very quickly, where the insurers would have known what their liability and exposure was, and any payout would have happened automatically. No human intervention at all was needed at the time. So there's a whole combination of different things going on here. But I do think the association of AI and blockchain is an interesting one, and I think it will play out in the Internet of Things, the supply chain world, the physical asset world. Will mature that relationship much quicker than the financial world.
It's fantastic views, and he opens a lot of other questions, but in order out of time. So, one question right now, going from all this part of the theory to the practice. So
Yeah.
you are involved really not just as a theoretical and as a thought leader, but you are right now part of, as the CTO and co-founder of 21 Million project.
Yeah.
You are as well part of the council member technology and blockchain.
Yeah.
You have a couple of different things. Can you tell us? Probably the 21 Million project, I think, is probably the biggest one. But tell us about the project and what you're doing in practice. I think that's a very important.
Yeah. Since the pensions experience, I in 2012 was the first time I came across Bitcoin actually. So I've been at this 4 or 5 years, which is apart from the real geeks, this is probably as long as anybody really. And I've been working in town and learning about blockchain for the last few years, doing a lot of speaking, a lot of writing, a lot of reading, and because I understand I've got a computer science background, then I can get to grips with the basis of the technology quite quickly. But I'm one of these people that I build things, so I always look for better ways of doing things, better ways of breaking industry rules and delivering a better experience or a better return or a better outcome. And quite often the blockchain community gets bogged down in the technology too much, where I try and bring it up a level. And as a business architect, I tend to think about what is the outcomes I'm trying to do. And if you think about the structural changes that blockchain brings, it's about stripping out the middleman. It's about collapsing industries. It's about taking out friction, time, cost. It's about simplifying business models. And where interaction and transactions are predictable, they're guaranteed, and there's a whole different bunch of primary attributes of the technology allows you to do different things. So I advise a number of boards. I've written some stuff for the legal profession, so I tend to go into law firms and try and get them to wake up because they're going to be completely disintermediated by this technology. I've done similar things with the Association of Chartered Accountants, and I wrote a white paper with them recently. Because technically, accountants, blockchain is a self-auditing, self-settlement reconciliation platform. So, the role of accounting. So as I've been going through that learning experience, I then stumble on industries that are ripe for transformation. And I've got some buddies who I'm in 21 billion with. And what is 21 billion? So simply put, most people who are looking for initial coin offering or ICO want to build a blockchain. We're not going to do that, okay? We're using the Ethereum public blockchain out of the box. And we have some smart contracts. And what we're using the blockchain model to do is to create a new way of financing and funding content, of financing films. And this is where the token is just the most genius thing that you've ever come across, because every blockchain comes with a token, yeah? And that token, as a coin, everyone calls it a coin, but it allows you to associate value, whether it's an asset, whether it's cash, whether it's a monetary value, whether it's an entitlement or a royalty. It allows you to associate value in different ways. So 21 million has a 21 million coin. The 21 million coin entitles you to a share of copyright. But copyright in what? So 21 million, we're going to make a film called 21 million. And it's about the Bitcoin revolution. And it is life parodying sort of fiction, but actually it's not fiction, it's actually happening. So it's a 120-minute film movie, which we're going to start shooting straight after the ICO, followed by a 12-part miniseries. And we're lining up some fairly heavyweight people who are all crypto investors and crypto anarchists. But essentially the storyline is that it's interesting, and we're introducing a couple of new concepts into this. The storyline is around about an FBI analyst that discovers a bug in the Bitcoin code. And then he decides, a bit Snowden-esque really, where he decides to jump ship and try and find Satoshi Nakamoto. And of course we all know the challenge with that. So it's a fast-moving, sort of stylized around the Bourne Identity, the Billions TV thing, bit of Hitman-esque, whatever. So it's a little bit dark, and we're in negotiation with some fairly heavyweight directors to take that on. So this analyst goes around the world and is trying to track down Satoshi, and of course, you know, there is a flaw in the code, because Satoshi's written in an algorithm that means on the day the last coin is issued, it also issues to everybody an extra 1 million coins. So, but that our view is Hollywood. You know, why is it that Hollywood allows the aliens always to die? Why is it the hero always wins? So we've introduced this thing called viewer-controlled content, which is cool thing you can do on the blockchain, you see. So we are going to shoot different endings, and we're going to allow viewers who are fans. So fans can come in and buy a token at very small amounts. So we're going to probably launch at about 48 cents for a token, and that can have 8 decimal places. So you can come in at very small amounts. And two things happen. First of all, you own the token. That is directly linked to content. So as we create more content, the value of that token should increase. When we sell that content and we syndicate the content to TV networks, which is the primary choice really at the moment, then that token generates a royalty, a payout, and you have smart contracts that completely automate that. And they're Ethereum smart contracts that are already on the network. So everything is open and transparent, it's instantly auditable, people get their royalties, there's no fuss, there's nothing going on. So that's the 21 million project. But I'm also working on 2 others. Another one is a land and property-backed token, and we're in negotiation with 2 European Deutsche Börses about having it as part of an exchange-traded instrument on a closed-ended fund. So what will that do? That will, you know, Dennis, that will bring in institutional investment, and this is where really, in terms of the Winklevoss guys and Gemini, they tried to go, I think, a step too far. My view is that you have traditional land and asset backed, where the token is underpinned by something that's real, then the financial community and the regulator will respect that. So you set it up as a traditional fund, and then you pull out a strip to tokenize, a crypto strip. And that combination, it's not an all or nothing, that combination allows the exchanges to make it a tradable, you know, investment product. So I'm working on that at the moment, and then I've also, with one of my my other friends who's very big in the sort of business intelligence world, we're working on a healthcare platform, which follows, because you've got 2 aspects, you've got health and healthcare. Health is prevention, healthcare is, you know, when you've become unwell. And of course, we're flipping the pyramid on its head because we're focusing on prevention, and that's got big data implications, big AI implications, and we have had conversations with DeepMind and various things. So I've got a business partner that's already got the relationships with most of the NHS, and if they don't want to do it, we're going to do it anyway. Which is probably what's going to happen with the NHS. They're trying to move into digital records management and all the different trusts around the country. Some of them are making progress, some of them aren't. Most of them have got no money left to spend on this sort of stuff. So we're going to do it for them. We're going to create a new infrastructure around blockchain, and then we're going to deliver it to them as here's one that's already there for you. So that's a big deal. That's a big push. And I'm going to start pushing that quite hard, probably later on this year. But my immediate focus is 21 million, and then getting this land-based token. Because most tokens actually are an ICO, initial coin offering, is new 2.0 capital markets, isn't it? You know, you've got wallets, you've got exchanges, completely. Now you've got a way of raising capital. But what most ICOs are, and there's a few out there that haven't gone so well, and maybe there's some questions to be asked. But a lot have enormously gone well, and they're a very efficient way of raising capital for the next generation of entrepreneur. But most of them are to build things. My approach is to use tokens and ICOs actually to raise capital to create content, and to create real assets rather than to build a software platform. So I'm not really in the business of... I do design blockchain ecosystems and solutions, but I'm not really in the business at the moment of, rewriting my own blockchain. It's very tempting to do that, but I'm not going down that route yet. But I do have clients where they ask me, what do you think? But so that's what I'm up to, Dennis. It's lots going on, and let's face it, Hollywood is sitting there as a sitting duck, really. How can the Lord of the Rings franchise that took $6 billion at the box office make a net operating loss of 160 million? There's sexism, there's pay inequality, there's a whole raft of issues the industry has. Return of the Jedi took, I think it was about $48 million to make took 350 million at the box office, but made an operating loss. I mean, that's creative accounting at its best, and you know, it all happens behind closed doors. You know, it's opaque accounting, you know, and most of us don't have the opportunity to invest in Star Wars. I mean, as a fan, I would. If I could have $5–10 worth, then you would invest in these things, but they're done behind closed doors. 21 million, you can invest as a fan. You can get involved, you can come on set, you can contribute to the script, you can do viewer control content, and you can actually say, well, I want this ending, I want a hero to die. You know, well, hey, you know, it's your prerogative. So we're trying to use the blockchain technology to open it up, to make it fair, open and transparent. And that's primarily what will bring people in as investors, when they can see it's a lot of fun, there's some good content, it's not too expensive to come in, and you know, I'm going to get a return, hopefully.
Well, fantastic. I think, well, I definitely have a couple more interviews to make with you. So I think we finished with Disrupting Hollywood, which is fantastic stuff. Disrupting Hollywood blockchain, which is in itself a fantastic.
Indeed.
And not just the idea, but as well the practical and the business model. Well, it's been fascinating. I thank you for all this. We've been in over 45 minutes. It's a good interview. I hope our fans will be excited as I was, and learning methodology. One of the things we're going to be doing is putting your bio information, links, so the people that are interested to learn more about you definitely will be able to contact you on Twitter. I think you can actually just, because this is going to be as well a podcast, you can actually mention where people can actually find you and contact you. Yeah, we'll wrap up with this.
Well, I'm an open networker, and I'm on most of the social media platforms. So my Twitter handle is @NickAyton, NickAyton. Just send me a message, and we can Skype, we can chat, I speak at a lot of different events. I write a lot of papers, and I write for some various blockchain publications, and hopefully for your publications as well. And yeah, if you want to talk blockchain, give us a call.
Yeah. So, well, don't just contact, of course, Nick, if you really have something powerful to say, don't spam him. But definitely read first his material, which is quite impressive, and research about him. Nick, thank you so much.
Thanks,
It's been a
Dennis.
pleasure.
Yeah, good to see you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Cheers.